In the brush, a powerful predator stalks its prey. The cheetah, native to Africa, is the world's fastest animal. But there are now just 7,000 of these graceful cats left in the wild. Poaching and habitat destruction could wipe them out in a generation. But we're a long way from Africa. Dartmoor Zoo is a 30-acre charity-run facility in England's southwest. Here, 152 species of exotic, endangered and even native animals are on public display. But this year, at the height of the tourist season, the zoo is empty. COVID-19 has closed all of Britain's 338 zoos and is threatening their very existence. COVID has killed more than 40,000 people in Britain. It's been the biggest economic shock since the Second World War. And as the country gradually comes out of lockdown, businesses are struggling to stay afloat because of the restrictions that are still in place. As I head to Dartmoor in early July, zoos have already been shut down for 5 months. And they've just been ordered to remain closed indefinitely. I want to find out if zoos can survive and if the UK actually wants them to. That is something.
That's amazing, isn't it? You can hear it for 7 miles, apparently. It's actually a warning to other lions, rather than anything else. It's to say that this land is occupied by lions already. You have to get used to that if you sleep here.
Former journalist Benjamin Mee is the owner of Dartmoor Zoo.
That's it. Good girl.
Ben moved here in 2006 with his wife Catherine and 2 small children.
Come on, Shauna. Here she goes.
Despite having no zookeeping experience, Ben managed to turn the failing zoo into a conservation centre for exotic species.
Always wanted to have zebras.
And into one of Britain's favourite animal attractions.
We bought the zoo because it was going to close down and the animals were going to be destroyed. And, you know, we thought, well, it just can't happen. It would have been like a little light going out in this region. And now it really means everything, I guess. It's my home, and those animals are part of my family. He's in astonishingly good shape.
Rescuing the zoo saved hundreds of animals, but Ben's wife Catherine didn't get to see it.
We got the place in October, and her tumour came back in December that year, 2006, and it was inoperable. And by the end of March, it was March 31st that she died. It was a very tough time, but I never, even for a second, thought we should stop this project. It would have just been, you know, more of a disaster. It would have just made it all worse.
After losing Catherine to cancer, Ben wrote a book about his experiences at Dartmoor, and everything changed.
What's so complicated about this place? It's a zoo.
The book inspired the film We Bought a Zoo, starring Matt Damon as Ben and Scarlett Johansson.
We need somebody who can really take charge of this place, or else we and all these animals are gone.
The film turned Dartmoor Zoo into a star attraction.
Thanks for saving the animals.
Thank you, thanks.
But thanks to COVID, the real-life Ben may not get a Hollywood ending.
It's been shut since March, and we're just in such an uncertain period, and that's the killer.
Without customers, Ben is rapidly going broke.
It's incredible. The costs of running a zoo are just monumental. I mean, my next book is going to be called Never Buy a Zoo. It's just not funny. It's not what people think at all. At the moment, with the animal feed and the essential keeping staff, it's running at about £11,500 a week at the moment, which is pared right down. Normally it's more like 40. The COVID's been really scary because the bills keep coming. you've got massive fixed costs, and there's absolutely no money at all through the normal channels.
What happens if you can't open within, say, a few weeks?
The worst case scenario, if they don't allow us to open, is we're back to that. We would have to euthanize the endangered animals and all of the animals. Closing down a zoo suddenly, there are too many animals to rehouse. Every other zoo is in a similar situation. You know, even some of the big zoos would have to euthanize all of the animals, and we can't let that happen.
There's been talk of a government bailout for zoos, but as of July, it hasn't come. Britain's furlough scheme helps pay 80% of wages, but it does not cover other costs like veterinary bills or feeding. Ben insured the zoo for, of all things, pandemics, but the insurer is balking.
The insurance company have said that they're not going to pay any claims, even the ones that they can see are valid, and it's really a holding tactic so that a lot of people will go out of business and won't claim. We've paid our premium. We're likely to go under if we don't get the payout, and they're saying no.
It doesn't seem right.
It really doesn't seem right at all.
With no formal support, COVID looks set to destroy Dartmoor Zoo. Then, something incredible happened.
Dartmoor Zoo needs to find £11,000 a week to survive the COVID-19 crisis.
Ben launched an online fundraising campaign. Despite their own financial stress, members of the local community donated enough money to keep the zoo running a few more months.
So far, I'm on day 10 of climbing Mount Everest.
Josh White had locals sponsor him to climb the height of Everest on the family stairs. He raised £20,000.
We are definitely going to Dartmoor Zoo as soon as this lockdown's over.
We were amazed and impressed with the amount of public support. It just makes you think people out there care about these animals in this place. It is a special place, and you know, we are trying hard to do the right thing, and people appreciate that, and I'm just so grateful. Yeah.
But with zoos closed indefinitely, Ben knows the donations will only last so long. The reality is, even in non-COVID times, charity-run facilities like Dartmoor struggle to survive each year.
Hello?
It begs the question, if zoos operate so close to the brink, should they exist at all?
It's easy to say animals don't belong in cages, and I agree in general, but the world is not a safe place for most of these animals. Every part of the globe, human incursion is causing habitat destruction. Modern zoos act like a kind of refugee camp for animals. It's like the Siberian tigers. There are 500 in Siberia, 500 in zoos. That's it. There's 1,000 of those animals left in the world. These guys up here, that's a significant proportion of the population waiting for the wild to be a fit place for them. For me, the key thing with zoos is that you are contributing to preserving endangered animals and protecting them for future generations.
British people have always enjoyed a day out at the zoo. Britain's first zoo was opened in the 1100s by a lord in Woodstock, Oxfordshire. His idea to bring the world's animals to Britain sparked a 900-year love affair with exotic creatures. But since the late 60s, many have questioned the point of zoos.
Born free as the wind blows.
Films like 1969's Born Free brought anti-captivity and conservation arguments into public debate. Many anti-zoo and animal protection movements emerged, including the charity Born Free, founded by the film's stars Bill Travis and Virginia McKenna.
He's magnificent.
The charity campaigns to keep animals in the wild and to protect their natural habitats.
From 20 years ago till now, we're still allowing wild animals to live in the most hideous conditions.
In response to the anti-captivity movement, British zoos rebranded, positioning themselves as centres for conservation as opposed to simply tourist attractions. But not everyone is convinced.
There's quite a pervasive attitude that's emerged in recent years that zoos are a force for good for conservation. The trouble is when you start to scratch the surface of these claims, they don't really stack up.
What does that mean?
So the proportion of the finances within the zoo industry that are going towards conservation is remarkably small. In the UK, on average, they were spending somewhere between 4% to 7% of their turnover on conservation in the wild. I would suggest that that is a pretty poor return on investment if these zoos are conservation organisations.
Don't zoos provide a really important role in helping these endangered animals survive?
So you're talking about animals that are part of captive breeding programs, so-called for conservation, but they're on display to the visiting public thousands and thousands of miles away from their natural home and their natural habitat, possibly in a completely different temperature, different humidity to what they always would, have evolved to live in. Captive breeding, where it does have a value, is in the country of origin of the animal, as near to the animal's natural habitat as possible, not the other side of the world in a metropolitan zoo.
But the environment for these wild animals is being so damaged that they say that captive breeding is like a lifeboat, a refugee centre for these animals because their habitat is under such threat.
The analogy you give of a lifeboat is an interesting one, because lifeboats are not supposed to float on forevermore. They're supposed to go somewhere else. They're supposed to save things and save people and get them off. But if we're not tackling the threat and we're just relying on captive populations, we're stuck in this awful status quo where we've got captive populations of animals with nowhere to go. And that is, in my opinion, that's a defeat. We've lost the battle once we're in that situation.
So what do you think should happen to zoos?
We should be looking at a way of phasing out zoos humanely, strategically, over time, not just slamming the door shut, but really just, reassess the value of zoos.
It makes me sad because I got into this whole thing as an animal rights activist. Some reason the animal rights people think animals don't belong in cages. So, well, think about it, some of them do, Mm-hmm. There are so many species going extinct all the time, and they're not going extinct in zoos, Those animals really do belong in those enclosures because that's how we can breed a safe population to supplement the wild population, which is hopelessly diminished. That's something you can't do without having captive animals.
As conservationists and zookeepers question the future of animals in captivity, there's an equally urgent threat facing British animals in the wild. The UK is one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world. In the past 50 years, native animal populations have plummeted 60% thanks to urban expansion and intensive farming. Whilst communities rally and raise funds to save animals in zoos, there isn't the same enthusiasm for saving native species in suburban backyards. But there are some fighting for Britain's creatures, great and small.
We just had a call from a local park. They've rung us to say they've got a deer trapped in a fence. It's tried to go through the fence and got its hip stuck. Depending on how long it's been there, depends whether it'll be a rescue release or not, or whether there's something more sinister going on.
All right, sweet one.
This is Simon Cowell, founder of the Wildlife Aid Foundation, a charity which rescues English animals in distress.
There's a good girl. Come on in. Come on in. Come on. All right, off you go. Go on. We get rescues all day, every day, and often all night as well. It's a hard slog, but you just got the satisfaction of knowing if you hadn't have been there, if you hadn't have done it, that animal might have died.
Wildlife Aid HQ is a repurposed manor nestled in the Surrey countryside.
Ed, welcome to the insane world of wildlife rehabilitation.
Good afternoon, Wildlife Aid. Could I have your name, please?
Part operations centre,
But they're very tiny.
part veterinary hospital. From here, Simon and 375 volunteers rescue and rehabilitate injured animals from around the country.
The whole point is to get it well as quick as we can and get it out. I mean, what we never do is contain an animal. My big thing is, you know, to me, the best cage is an empty cage. If it's got to be in a cage, it's for the shortest time possible, and then it goes out and has a properly natural life in its natural habitat.
Good afternoon, Wildlife Aid. Could I have your name, please?
During COVID, case numbers are at their highest in 40 years.
It's been incredibly busy. Everybody's been out walking, so the animals are now being found. So we've been getting hundreds more animals than we normally would.
Okay, and how can I help?
Volunteers answer a distress call every 4 minutes,
Is he now trapped in the garden?
while vets treat over 80 injured animals every day. And what sort of animals?
Today we've got 5 baby hedgehogs, a blue tit, a dunnock, bullfinch and a pigeon. So
And it's 11 o'clock.
it's 11 o'clock, so it's going to be a long day.
How many were there? 5?
5.
In the ICU, vets tend to 5 baby hedgehogs rescued from dogs this morning in a local backyard.
What happened?
He had a little patch of his skin on his back here was getting all abscessed and horrible. So one of the vets took that and cleaned it all out and put a bandage over the top to stop it getting any worse. As you can see, he's quite lively, so hopefully he's doing okay.
For the team, every hedgehog saved is a small victory. Because of habitat destruction, the hedgehog could go extinct within the decade.
The rate we're building, I mean, things that were woodland 5 years ago is now a housing estate, and I find that quite tragic. There's more roads, they're putting more dangerous chemicals down, taking away green space. I mean, everything we do actually has a detrimental effect on wildlife, apart from those of us who are trying to do our little bit of conservation. As far as Wildlife Aid is concerned, we're like a hospital, we're doing a patch-up and repair job, and it matters because we don't want to lose too many of these species, but we need mankind to realise the importance of them and that everything has its place in nature.
There he is, look.
Part of Wildlife Aid's mission is to get that message out to the British people. So they film many of their call-outs and post them online.
We do loads of these rescues. All sorts of animals get stuck in football nets in the gardens or tennis nets or any sort of netting, and it will kill them.
Go on, off you go. Go on.
Simon tells us viewing numbers have gone up during COVID. For Wildlife Aid, it's an encouraging sign.
I mean, I'm hoping that COVID has made us see that it's really important to have habitat and wild animals in the right places and not abuse them, because if we do start abusing things and doing it wrong, we get pandemics. And, you know, everything has its place in this planet. Sadly, man's overtaken it too much. We came onto a planet which has been very successfully running for about 5 billion years, and in the last 200 years we've really done it immense damage. And you know, we need the planet. The planet does not need us. It really doesn't. It could function very well without us, and probably better. So we need it to be in place and working. And I think we should be far more sensitive to all the creatures that we share this planet with. As a species, we should know better.
If the UK is to save its native species, it must rethink its relationship with nature and repair the damage done by humans. Thankfully, a way to quickly and sustainably do just that has been found in an unlikely place. I've come to the grounds of a 12th century castle to meet Isabella Tree. How are you? I won't come close. How are you? This is very magnificent. A former travel writer, Izzy helps her husband Charlie run the estate. Traditionally a wheat and dairy farm, the land has been in Charlie's family for generations. But when the couple took over, centuries of overuse had left the land infertile and they were unable to continue farming.
We were ploughing this land, we were drenching it in chemicals, and it just couldn't rebound. By the late 1990s, we were $1.5 million in debt and thinking of other things that we could do with the land rather than battling against it all the time.
Desperate, Izzy and Charlie embarked on a radical experiment. They stopped farming, reseeded their land with wild grasses, and reintroduced native cow, deer, and pony species, and then let everything run wild.
The idea was to just see if we could kickstart biodiversity, get systems working again, get processes functioning. And it was a complete revelation.
What happened next may change the future of British conservation and zoos forever. Centuries of farming at Knepp Estate in Horsham, England, had left its fields infertile and the farm on the brink of collapse.
Oh, God, that didn't sound good so good, did it? Okay.
But a radical experiment by owners Charlie and Isabella has done something incredible. Knepp Estate is a land transformed, or more accurately, transforming.
I'm expecting to see a rhino.
In just 2 decades, 3.5 thousand acres of once infertile farmland is now teeming with plants and wildlife.
And so the excitement here is that each field we go through, you will see this really complex assemblage of plants coming back into this landscape. And that's really, as Izzy always calls it, rocket fuel for nature.
Allowing native flora and fauna to grow wild has created entirely new habitats, which has essentially healed the land. Native longhorn cattle are now farmed sustainably and are key drivers in a conservation project unlike anything else in Britain. So because they're here and the way they eat, they're helping to create the environment for other animals.
Without these big animals roaming around this landscape, it would just turn into a close country woodland, which is very species poor. It's the battle between vegetation succession and animals, and this fight is going on, and that's what you're seeing, and that's what you're seeing the dynamics of out here, and that's why you're getting all this life back in.
The process called rewilding has transformed Knepp Estate into an incredible incubator for life. Species long extinct on the British Isles have returned and are thriving here.
So we've stopped just here because up in that oak tree there, we have white storks. One of them came from France, one of them came from our pen, built a nest here, and they've got 1 chick. This is the first time storks have nested and bred in Britain for 604 years.
Wow.
We are bringing back storks to Britain. We'll get out and have a look.
Let's do that. Why were they wiped out 600 years ago?
Well, we're pretty sure they were eaten. They appear as fare on medieval banquet menus. But white storks often became a symbol of insurgents. And so after the restoration of King Charles II in Britain, the royalists wanted to get rid of those white storks because they were worried that it would foment dissent against the king again.
Amazing, and here it is in an oak tree.
In a good old English oak.
Good old English oak tree, there it is, leading the nature insurrection.
Yes, exactly.
I love it. With storks leading the charge, other lost and endangered species are now flourishing here. The numbers of peregrine falcon, bees, beetles, the purple emperor butterfly, and the endangered turtle dove have increased dramatically.
Okay, we head out, folks.
So too, the number of tourists. Due to overwhelming interest, Knepp now hosts day tours and farm stays. eco-tourism transforming it into a type of living, self-sustaining zoo.
I had no idea that there would be so much interest in nature. And we've had a terrible year with COVID-19, but in general terms, you have maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people coming to see this wildlife.
4,000 or 5,000 people a year?
Yeah. And we are 100% booked up a year in advance. And so now, through tourism, through meat production, we now have got a really quite profitable and stable enterprise.
Knepp Estate is proof that farming, conservation and tourism can coexist and be financially viable. With several British landowners deciding to rewild parts of their farms too, could the Knepp experiment be a future alternative to zoos and the answer to the conservation crisis?
If you want to get truly functioning nature again, you've got to let go. We're not talking about rewilding the whole planet, but if we want to conserve the systems on which, life on this planet depends, rewilding is a way that we can show how to do that, and we can do it very rapidly. Within 20 years, we had these incredible successes. Nature has the answers. We just have to make a big mind shift and move into that process.
Hi Ben, how are you?
Hey, hi there Evan, how you doing,
see you
man?
again.
Good to see you. Yeah, all right.
How have things been?
Yeah, not so bad, thanks.
A month after our first trip to Dartmoor, there's been a huge mind shift here too.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.
British zoos have been allowed to reopen with a cap on visitors and strict social distancing rules.
So there was a point where we were told absolutely no chance of zoos opening for the foreseeable future, and then 4 days later they said you can open tomorrow, and people have come, with a vengeance, and it's been really heartwarming.
Ben still hasn't seen the insurance payout, but he did get a small grant from the government as part of a £100 million bailout for zoos.
Most days at the moment are sold out. I mean, we only have 300 places a day, but yeah, at the moment the projections are that we'll survive this year, which is great. That's all we can ask for.
COVID-19 may have shown the precarious nature of zoos, but for now, Dartmoor seems safe. For visitors still carrying the scars of the pandemic, the zoo is proving a way to help them heal.
Oh my God, I feel so blessed right now.
Zoo regular Evie has schizophrenia and hears voices.
Oh, you're filling me with such joy right now.
For her, the chance to return to Dartmoor is a lifeline.
During lockdown, I was frightened. The voices were saying nasty stuff. But when I'm around these guys, everything just slowly just slips away. And that's why I count this a privilege.
Hey, how are you?
I'm really well.
Good.
Been down for you then?
He has.
For Ben, it's yet another reason why Britain and the world still needs zoos.
Yeah, it's a magical place. It's not just about, here is a lion, please buy an ice cream. We're trying to protect animals and the environment and then help people. That, to me, is the primary function of modern zoos.